Many young athletes struggle with discipline, consistency, and accountability. But what many young athletes don't know is that something as simple as setting goals is scientifically proven to increase your consistency and your performance. I am thrilled to be working with the company Sports Hogs. It is a family-run company that specializes in making journals where you can track your process goals. Each journal, here's mine for basketball, gives you an opportunity to list your goals, how you want to implement them, and then gives you opportunities to not only reflect on goals in your workouts, but also reflect on each game performance over the course of the season. My favorite part of these Sports Hogs journals is the space where you as an athlete can list positive affirmations to keep yourself motivated. And if you need a little extra positivity, there are great quotes from legendary athletes filled in the journal. This family did an outstanding job creating resources for young athletes all over the country. And if you want to take advantage of this resource, visit sportshogs.com. That's sportshogs.com. Get a hand on your journal today. Greetings, information superhighway. Welcome to episode 12 of the Nail the Recruiting Process podcast. My name is Jared Zogman. I am pumped to be here. We have a great interview coming your way with tons of informational and educational content about the college recruiting process. But first, I know that you, the listener, are here for one very important reason. And no, that reason is not learning about the college basketball recruiting process. That reason is hearing my take on the New York Mets, right? That's why we're all here. Just making sure. Well, here we go. The Mets are 2 games up in the wild card. We were here a week ago and they were 2 games back, not qualified for anything. And now they're in the second wild card spot. Tiebreaker on the Diamondbacks, 2 games above the Braves. That's a 4-game swing in a week. And if you wonder why I'm so excited, perhaps it's because I have spent now 38 years on this planet watching the Mets collapse in September basically every season that they're not competing for a World Series. So this is crazy. And I could wax poetic about the talent, the energy, and the fun factor of this team. But instead, I will say this. This is the first season I can remember in a while that the Mets as an organization are doing the thing that any successful team in any sport is doing to put themselves in position to win a championship. And here is that thing. Their cohesion is getting stronger in the face of the biggest adversity that they're facing all year. Jeff McNeil breaks his hand. No big deal. We'll figure it out. We'll step up. We'll win a bunch of games against in-division rivals. Francisco Lindor needs to go on the DL. Well, I hear this guy's been shredding the minors, and he's got this older brother that's pretty good at baseball. Let's give him a try. And wouldn't you know it, Luis Angel Acuna is incredible. He just plays baseball with so much joy and electricity, and he was the jolt of adrenaline that this team needed. Everything that the Mets are doing as a clubhouse is what you would want to see a team do as a manager or a coach. They respond to adversity better than, and I can't believe I'm saying this, any team in baseball right now. I think the fans are bought in. I think the team is bought in. And this has quickly transformed from, this is a fun little run. Let's see what happens. And the future is bright to, we can do this season. So I am all in. I got my Doc Gooden throwback jersey on in hopes that young prodigy Kodai Senga can make it back for the playoffs. I am so excited to watch the final 8 to 10 days of the regular season because the Mets can sneak their way back into a division crown, although it will take a lot of help from the Phillies. So many different things are happening right now for this team. Please watch them. Even if you're not a big baseball person, there is something that you can learn from this current Mets team. Moving along. There is one question in today's podcast that I've gotten recently that was not answered by the person I'm interviewing, so I want to take a stab at answering it right now. And it's basically a question about breakups. I've made my decision. I think I know what I want to do. Well, if you've made your decision, you know what you want to do. How do I, in a classy way, break up with the other schools that are recruiting me? And there's a number of different ways you can do it, but I'm going to tell you what not to do because that's the most important thing. You're not going to ghost anybody, and you're not going to make somebody call you. After all, you're being recruited to be a college athlete. Being a successful college athlete requires continued development and your ability to have difficult conversations, particularly in person. Now, you're not going to have the opportunity to reject people in person, but you better make the opportunity for yourself to do it over a phone call. So step one, you're going to text the coaches. Hey, coach, do you have some time to chat? I've made a decision. I want to, loop you in. Thank the coach for everything they've done. Make sure that they understand your awareness, that you understand that recruiting is a big thing, that you really appreciate the investment and the time they put into you, and that you have elected to pursue a different school. And if you're really comfortable, you can concisely share why. Maybe it was the academics. I felt a little bit differently about the way I wanted to be coached, felt differently about this team. I think this place is a better overall fit for me. And then you're going to do kind of a thank you sandwich. So thank you. Here's my decision and why. And then the other thank you. Thank you again. And, I really hope our paths cross again down the line. I'll be a fan of yours. Okay. Here's the reason why it's so important that you do that. Reason one is because things change. First of all, coaches can switch positions. Second of all, you might transfer. Now, I hope that's not what happens to you. I hope you sign up for a place you have a great 4-year experience. But right now, 20% of the pool is transferring. So in the 1 in 5 chance that's you want to have your options open without burned bridges. But second of all, you need to train yourselves in having difficult conversations. And the more you can do now in high school, the better off you're going to be in college when more difficult conversations come your way. So the execution of this is simple. I know that internally it's not so simple, but it's something that you really, really need to do. Now, that is about the only question that you will not have answered about the recruiting process today. I'm extremely excited to share this interview, and I usually save the name of my guest until the very end, but I'm going to share it in the beginning. I'm excited about my interview with Allison Roberts. Allison Roberts is not a member of the high school basketball, AAU basketball, or college basketball community. In fact, Allison's going to talk to you about the half-year stint she had as a basketball player over the course of her young life. But here's what Allison does know. She knows recruiting. In fact, I think she knows recruiting better than just about anybody in the country. And Allison runs How to Get Recruited, a recruiting service much like mine, except instead of specializing in helping college basketball players or prospective college basketball players, she helps volleyball prospects navigate the recruiting process. She's a former Division I athlete. She is a scholarship level coach. She has done so many things inside of the volleyball community, especially at the college and club levels. And for family reasons, which you'll hear her share, she stopped coaching, at least in the environment that you would consider to be real coaching. Now, she advises young high school volleyball players through the recruiting process, and she is damn good at it. When I was learning how to do what I wanted to do, I did a lot of market research. I did not want to roll this out ice cold. I wanted to find people that I thought had similar values with me, that were running a business similarly to the way I'd want to do it, but most importantly, people that did not want to have dishonest conversations. It's really easy to look at every kid you work with and be like, you're a D1 kid. It's much harder to potentially turn away your own business and be like, we need to find what's right for you, and this thing might not be what's right for you. It's much harder to push high school kids because college kids expect to be pushed. Not all high school kids expect to be pushed. It's much harder to push high school kids and be like, this is what you need to be thinking about. This is what you need to be thinking about. Don't worry about this. You figure this out first, and then we'll figure the rest of the stuff out. Not everybody wants to do that. And what I found quickly in my research was that Allison Roberts was pushing young volleyball players to think critically, act differently, and be better. Basically, dress like you want the next job for prospective college volleyball players. So I just reached out to her cold. And we ended up building a really good relationship. She gave me a lot of feedback on my early content. She's been a big supporter. I constantly am, reposting her stuff and saying, hey, this might say volleyball on it, but basketball players, this is for you. She's done some of the stuff with my content, just reframing it for volleyball players. And we started talking a couple of weeks back, and we were like, we've got to do a podcast exchange. So I'm up first. She is coming on my podcast to talk about everything she has learned from a recruiting perspective. Now, there's a reason why she's here. It turns out volleyball recruiting and basketball recruiting have a tremendous amount in common. And aside from a couple early minutes where we talk about what we have in common, you can be ready to hear tons of advice about every part of the recruiting process. And I mean every part, from deciding that you really want to do this, to what your immediate next steps should be, to how you want to handle visits, expectations, difficult conversations, and most importantly, how you want to handle the current developmental work that is in front of you. All of those things are discussed in tremendous detail. If you want to learn directly from Coach Allison, you will find her links and her social media information in the episode description wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you are a volleyball player that is checking this out for the first time, welcome. I hope you enjoy the content, and also sorry about the Met stuff. That is unfortunately just part of the deal moving forward. And finally, for our basketball people, there is one specific thing you're going to hear her talk about that I think resonates very true for the current crop of young basketball players. You're going to hear her talk above all else about the importance of finding your right people, regardless of division. Finding the people that are clearly going to pour into you, finding the people that are going to push you to be your best self, finding the place that has the most people that are going to encourage you to make mistakes, learn from mistakes, and ultimately grow because you made mistakes in a supportive environment based on experiential learning. There's a lot of influence out there, young basketball players, and I think you need to listen very carefully to Coach Allison Roberts as she shares with you the things that most influenced her and what she has learned, transitioning from player to coach to recruiting mentor. Let's go Mets. Let's dive in. Coach Allison, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jared. Excited to be here.
I'm very excited to see you. I've shared with our listeners that you've actually kind of been a mentor to me as I've tried to figure out how to do this. And for the listener that might be wondering why, what's a volleyball coach doing on the basketball podcast? One of the first things we really learned was how universal a lot of the things we are teaching are, and how commonplace a lot of what we're talking about is, regardless of the sport. But I will start by asking you this, because this is a question I ask all volleyball players, because they tend to also be tall and athletic. Did you ever play basketball?
I played one semester in 7th grade because my dad played like all the sports, and he was a pretty good basketball player. So I played one semester in 7th grade. I was 5'10" in 7th grade, so they just stuck me under the basket. They were like, rebound, get it out. Don't try to dribble. Don't try to shoot. Probably don't try to run and talk. Rebound, get it out. So I enjoyed the team aspect, but I also did not like people in my personal space. That was my big bugaboo, and a big reason why I chose volleyball. There was a net between me and the opposing team, which I always appreciated. But I did love my one season. I had a lot of fun.
I can respect that as someone that watches volleyball. The lack of opponents in your face aside from at the net.
Different game.
Yeah. But in a weird way, I also feel like that puts a different type of mental pressure on you. Like, I had a very old school coach growing up that he would go around the room and ask, what's the hardest shot in basketball to make? And his answer was a wide open layup with nobody near you. And then every time someone missed a layup, he would like magically show up and just get in your ear and be like, that's the hardest shot in basketball to make. So I can imagine like clamming up if I have opportunity to like bump it or set it with no one near me.
Right. It is like each touch is all on you, but it is also like your contact affects the next person, affects the next person. Yeah, there's so many similarities and differences in sports, but yeah, that's absolutely a big kicker is don't touch me. Just, just do your thing, I'll do my thing.
I'm an excellent athlete as long as you are far away from me.
Yes.
I love
That's
it.
what track was my other sport that I competed in. If you were gonna ask that question, that was my only other one.
This is honestly what we're talking about could also be like an incredible slogan for introversion. Like, I am phenomenal at what I do as long as you are away from me, which is basically how I feel at the end of every day.
Which is funny because I'm an extrovert, but it's like in track and field. So I did high jump. I did all the jumps. I did high jump, long jump, triple jump. And it's like after you do your jump, you're just talking with all the other people. You're just shooting the breeze. Like, there's a bird over there. What's hard in middle school? You know, all that fun stuff. So it's funny how that kind of plays out.
So we have a lot of similar experiences, and it's important right off the rip for anybody listening to be able to get to know you a little bit. So you spent a lot of time coaching. You're a former athlete. We'll talk a little bit more about both of those endeavors later. But just to get started, what led you to start How to Get Recruited and, be a guide to mentor young athletes through the volleyball recruiting process? How did that get started for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I love sport from a very young age. I was always interested in athletics. I was always interested in challenging myself to figure things out just physically on the jungle gym, on, God help me, the basketball court, wherever I was. I wanted to do the best that I could. So I, clung to volleyball. Volleyball was my favorite. Played in high school. I played in college. And I played when I was a high schooler. It was kind of that age when I was a sophomore, where it was that time where it was like, okay, I'm pretty good. I was playing on a lower level team. Do I want the big club experience? Like, was kind of making those choices, and I did choose to play for, one of the top clubs in the country that's in the Dallas, Texas area. And I played for that club, and it was, a great experience. I loved my time. I loved playing at a high level. And that's when kind of the recruiting conversations came up of, do you want to play in college? I never wanted to stop playing. So I was like, heck yeah, I want to keep playing as long as I can. And they had some seminars. They had a recruiting coordinator, but they didn't necessarily like walk you through the process. They weren't necessarily guiding you. And,
Sure.
I thank God I did wind up at a school that I loved. I had an amazing college experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. But looking back, are there things that I would do differently in my recruiting process? Absolutely. And it was kind of one of those things where you're just throwing spaghetti at a wall, seeing what stuck. And that's kind of what my recruiting process looked like. And it did work out. But I definitely wanted someone to bounce ideas off of and be like, there's over 2,000 colleges with women's volleyball. I don't know the exact numbers for basketball. I would assume it's pretty similar.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, where do I start? Like you start at the big schools, the places that you've heard of, all that. But at the end of the day, it goes so much deeper than that. So I, after playing in college, I coached in college for 6 years and ended up becoming a military spouse. And I met my husband. We had 3 kids in 3 years, and we were in a place where coaching in college did not make sense for our family. So I stepped into the club game and became a recruiting coordinator for a local club that we were at in Tennessee at the time. And I was like, I want to help with recruiting. I need to help with recruiting. I love recruiting. I kind of missed it, honestly. That was my favorite part of coaching in college, was the recruiting process. So I was happy to help. I held a couple seminars for my club. And after a seminar, a senior in March would come up to me and be like, what should an email look like? Or, how do I get a college coach to call me? And I'm like, you call them. What are you talking about? Just simple things that I was like, how has nobody broken this down for you? So it was at that point and that I was like, there's something there. And then one day I read a blog from a big recruiting website about why parents should not help their student athlete play in college. And it was pretty much a fear-mongering feel of a blog, and it was like parents don't know what to say, and they have unrealistic expectations for their athletes, and all these things. And I was so angry after reading it. I was like, so tell them, help them,
teach them what to say.
Why is it that? So that day is when I opened up my Instagram account for how to get recruited, and it's just kind of grown and developed, and it's been an amazing blessing and gift to me. I absolutely love what I do, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So that's kind of my
I imagine with where you are now, like I imagine when you started this, did you have any expectation that it's like, this is going to be my full-time thing and I am going to be like the go-to person in the volleyball recruiting consulting space? Like, did you have any vision of that when you set out to do this?
I didn't even know what it was. I thought I was going to be like a recruiting influencer. Like I don't know. I just kind of started talking about it, and it just kind of grew and developed, like with my personality and with the personalities of my athletes that I was working with, and a lot of people who would reach out and say, "Hey, I want to know about this." I was like, "Okay, I'll tell you about this." So yeah, I had no clue how it would grow. It's been it's been amazing. It's not by my own power. I'm so thankful for all my people in my support system, but it's been really fun to watch it grow.
Very, very cool. And it's funny to hear about your origins from that blog, because I don't think, and I think the only person in my orbit that really gets this about what I'm doing now is my wife. And I wonder if you have the same thing with your husband, where like, when my wife listens to the conversations I'm having, she would look at anybody else and be like, yeah, he's still coaching.
Right.
And I wonder, is that a similar thing that you feel like? Do you feel like you coach the recruiting process right now?
Yeah, I was always Coach Allison as when I was playing in college, I started coaching club. I was Coach Allison. I was Coach Allison when I was a college coach, and my recruits that I work with still call me Coach Allison. So yeah, it is very much coaching. It's similar conversations. It's just different goals and different kind of tactics to get you to those goals.
All right. So our goal now, Coach Allison, our goal is to sort of drive these fences together. And I want you, as much as possible, you and I are going to approach the rest of this conversation thinking about all sports in mind, and just the best ways for recruits to put their foot forward, things that stood out to you about your own process, and we're going to focus on the transferable things. And I think the best place for us to start with that is your own college experience. So I believe, I want to make sure I have this right, you graduated in 2013?
Yes.
Okay, so you go to play D1 volleyball at Presbyterian just as they become a Division I school. So that's a very unique recruiting process. Having gone through that process yourself, and now that you've seen so many other processes, are there certain parts about your own process when you look back at it? You alluded to some of it in your first response, where like, were there any things that really surprised you that you think are worth sharing with, a recruit or their parents that are listening now?
Oh yeah, so much. We can make an entire podcast just off of that question, honestly. Again, and I'll always preface, I absolutely love PC. It is an amazing place, amazing people. It was really the people is why I went there at the end of the day, and I would not change it for the world. But yes, as a 16, 17-year-old going through this process, you're going to be looking at it through a different lens. And if you had asked me that same question right after I had graduated in 2013, I would give you a different answer than I would give you now.
Interesting.
It's funny to look back and think, why did I choose this school? And I say it's the people, and that's 100% what it was. But when I look at the other offers that I had on the table, I was just talking with my mom about this the other day, because the memory's a little fuzzy, and I'm like, do I remember this correctly? And just thinking through my different visits, like I had a lot of different schools that I was talking to. I wasn't tied down to a location. My dad's a pilot. I always loved traveling. I was kind of up for whatever. And so I saw a lot of different types of schools, different places, different coaches, different styles. And, I think one thing that I would maybe go back and change potentially if I could is I was offered a walk-on position from my top school. They were my number one school in the whole process, kind of start to finish kind of thing. and they offered me a walk-on position, and my 16-year-old ears heard, "You're not valuable," because they were not offering scholarship. And I think it's something, I don't know where this stigma started, the whole D1 stigma and the whole full ride. There's a big stigma tied to that. And so that was my goal, was D1 full ride. That, I was pretty flexible on all the other details, but those were the main things I wanted. And I think looking back, this school had everything I was looking for. It was in a great location. It was a good, like, medium-sized school, amazing coaches, amazing people, great campus, good facilities. I walked away, like, from the conversation of, "Here's a walk-on position." I said, "No, thank you, not interested." And looking back, I'm like, I should have engaged with that. I should have looked at different scholarship options at the university, academics, different kind of things. So that's definitely a big one that I would walk back and have a conversation with my younger self about.
I think about this a lot. And, the funny thing about us building a relationship over social media is we have behind the scenes commented on some of the stuff that we have posted. And one of the things that seems to be a big, I'll call it red flag for both of us, is disillusionment about fit. And if I were to interpret what you just shared, because to me it is, I see this place that was basically waving its giant inflatable arms at me and saying, "I am the perfect fit for you," but I was very worried about the status part of it and how that interferes with the goals that I set in my head. Is that a fair way of transcribing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely it.
I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but could we potentially agree that that is maybe one of the biggest challenges that you and I face with our clientele day to day?
Between stigma around different levels and the stigma behind scholarship, 100%. I would say those are two super common conversations I'm having.
So between the two of us, we have literally coached at every level of the NCAA, except every level of the NCAA. You have the NAIA. And I guess a listener that's an alumnus of a USCAA school, I guess, could complain about this. But I'm willing to forego that and say we've got our bases covered. And I want to talk about this because I feel like you probably had to dispel a lot of that, not only during your time coaching at a great D2, but also in steering recruits towards D2 or lower. And I was constantly looking at these recruits at the D3 level that were adamant about trying to go D1, and I would watch them go to camps, and like the messaging that you're a perfect fit for a high D3 was smacking them in the face. And they were still trying to go D1, and I felt like I was not in the right position to ask why as a Division III coach, right? Because of course I'm going to ask why as a Division III coach. It's in my best interest to recruit the kid. But now that you and I are not doing that anymore, it's a good opportunity to break that down. So let's start with Southwestern Oklahoma State. Great school, great facilities, and I'm going to ask this just so that I don't come off as condescending. But let's just say hypothetically, I put you guys up against a low, mid-major Division I school. Who wins?
Today or back when I was a player / coach? But
I'll allow either.
I'd pay to watch the game either way. It would be tight. My first year there, definitely a growing year. My second year, we started doing it. The year after I left, so all the recruits that I brought in, they won the conference championship, and they would have beaten a lot of the Division I schools that I played against and were in my conference at PC.
In both of my Division I coaching experiences, on the men's side and the women's side, I watched a Division II scrimmage where the Division II team gave the Division I team the business.
It happens all the time. All the time.
And I don't think enough, and I really want you to fill in the blanks here because I'm about to explain this super poorly. That's a great thing for a podcast host to say, by the way. I think people look at divisions as tiers, just going linear, where they should look at them a little bit more like a Venn diagram that kind of stacks, where like you've got your D2 and you got your D1, but then you have this area in the middle where, and there's been research on this, like the top 20% of D2 is outspending the bottom 20% of D1. So it's full it's full scholarships for their top athletes. It's better facilities, full coaching staffs, and there's still kids that would get so hung up on the fact, well, that's not D1. What do you say to that kid?
Oh, I say a lot to that kid, and this is why we get along so well, Jared. I'll share with you a PDF I have of a different scale that is exactly what you just explained. This is why we get each other. It's so much more than your sport. You know, it's so much more than your sport. Really, like why I coached at SWASU is kind of the acronym for it. Why I coached there is because of the people. Why I chose PC was because of the people. I genuinely think one of the most powerful things that you can do in your life is surround yourself with people who are going to bring the best out of you and who are going to make you better. Sports, academics, work, whatever it is. You have to, you can't do any of this on your own. And for the athletes who are so hung up on D1, number one, I ask them why. Why D1? And sometimes they give me a good answer. I think a fair answer is I want to compete with the best.
Sure.
That's fair. Absolutely. And then to that, I always say, okay, well, tell me about some D2 games that you've watched.
Have you seen a D3 practice? Is my buzz one. Yep.
Like, tell me why you have this category and kind of this firm line in your mind. And, you know, I respect it. It's fine. And I think there are, you know, some athletes who are physically at the point where like D1 is just, you know, a good fit and they want to eat, breathe, sleep volleyball or, you know, whatever their sport is. And to those kids, I say, okay, let's go for it. But to pretty much every other athlete, I'm like, we should not just be honing in on one level. If D1 is your goal, that's great. That's awesome. Like, let's talk about it. But we can't just be honing in on D1 schools, because I can't tell you how many athletes in my time I've seen D1, D1, D1. No, I'm not talking to the D2. No, I'm not talking to the JUCO, the D3. I'm D1, D1. Late in your senior year, and they're like, oh, this is not working out. I'll just go to a big school and, you know, enjoy my student life. And it's like, that's the right choice for some people, but I so wish that athletes would just try it, because it's no commitment to you to send an email to a school. It's no commitment to you to pick up the phone and talk to a school. You're not committing. You know, when you get to that point, then you can decide, is it the right fit? Is D2 the right fit? Is, you know, the scholarship, everything else? But up until that point, just have the phone call, you know, to hear what they have to say. Because, yeah, the facilities at SWASU are insane. I played Division I. I played at a small Division I. Not great facilities. They've gotten better. But I played against a lot of the big schools. We played at Arizona. We played at Illinois State. We played at a lot of big schools with great facilities. SWASU has just as good. Bless you.
Huge sneeze.
We'll truck right past it. SWASU has better facilities than a lot of those major Division I programs I played against. It's not as big, but it's nicer. And it's a way bigger stadium than I played in as a D1 athlete. And if I had seen that, if I had physically gone to campus and seen that as a high school athlete, you would have had my interest. Absolutely.
And I think to myself, by the way, I truly believe that saying SWASU so many times is what got me to sneeze. It's close enough to a sneezing sound.
SWASU.
Yeah. See, bless you. Yeah. My thought around this is so much of missteps in the recruiting process is due to a lack of, I guess we'll call it, awareness. Mm-hmm. How well do I know myself? How well do I know my options? So I think about your transition from coaching at the collegiate level to now running a club. This is something I have not done. Someone has asked me recently how, like, if I would consider doing it, and right now I have no. I just, like, there's too many dynamics to club basketball. I don't know how it compares to club volleyball, but I imagine that you might have had some stubborn heifers during your time working at the club level. Is it possible, and this is more for the sake of our listeners than for me, because I bet I know the answer, but is it possible that you've tried to direct some people that really weren't hearing it, that were adamant that, you know, it was going to work out some way, and maybe they really were not in touch with the amount of work it took to accomplish that, and then all of a sudden they stop playing the game that they love, and they're looking back with regret? Have you seen that story coaching at the club level?
Yes, so many times. I think more athletes, and I think the stigma is changing a little bit. I think more athletes are understanding the options. And it's so multifaceted because there's more athletes playing club sports than ever before. There's more competition and the spots aren't increasing at the college level, but the athletes who are fighting for those spots are increasing. So the way that they go about the process has changed dramatically. And I think more athletes are understanding, I love the sport. That's the core of why I want to keep playing. You know, it's, yes, I do want to play D1 and that's great, but really I don't want to stop playing my sport. Or, you know, I've been working with a lot of athletes who are interested in the medical field. Tons of athletes are interested in working in the medical field, which I love. And doing that at the Division I level is hard. Really hard. If you're doing pre-med, if you want to do nursing, I've had coaches tell me, we don't take nursing students because it doesn't work once you get to clinicals. You have to miss a lot of practices, potentially games. There's just a lot of conflict there. So I think more athletes are getting it and understanding it. It's a big picture thing. Like, let's zoom out past the D1 and let's look for some other things that are important and valuable and are going to set you up for success after college. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Even though we love our sport and even though we're going to learn so much through it, it's bigger than just the sport itself.
So is it fair to say that a good portion of your why can be sort of reduced down to, I love this sport, you love this sport, I want to see you play this sport at the next level in the place that's best for you so that you can take what this sport has to teach you at the next level? Is that sort of the relationship you want to have with your clients?
Absolutely. And that's why when I do work one-on-one with athletes, I watch their film, I go to their games. I'm not blind to it. And that's important to have someone watching your film to give you the feedback of, yeah, D1 is within your reach, or we need to rework that and really kind of hone in on where coaches are going to be excited to get back in touch with you. Because there's also this subsection of athletes who maybe they could play D1, but they're going to be filling a roster spot, or they're going to be sitting the bench for 2, 3, 4 years. And I personally have never met an athlete who was happy in that role.
Right.
That's another reason why I chose Presbyterian, is because I wanted to play. Like, I had never been a bench player. Even as a coach, it was hard to be on the bench, even though I had to. I legally couldn't. So that was a big reason why I chose that, is there was playing time that was, prepped and ready. Nothing's guaranteed, but it was there. And I knew that when I was making that decision. So I think, I think it's just, yes, I love the sport. Yes, I want to see athletes succeed. Athletics has so much to teach athletes about life, about who they are. I think the college age, the big thing that drew me there is people are figuring out who they are. I had no idea who I was what I was going to do when I was going into college. And I figured that out, and I figured it out a lot after college too. But I think there's just so much with those athletes where they're figuring out who they want to be. And I think athletics is going to teach them a lot of those life lessons of responsibility, of work ethic, of, character, just a million things that they're learning. And at the same time, they're getting a great education so that they can do what they want to do after college, whatever that looks like.
So you just said something that resonated with me in your response, which is that people's journey towards the next level is so multifaceted, and their whys could be so different, and it's kind of a responsibility that we take on ourselves, to like help them find that why.
Right.
I wanna call your attention to a specific archetype of athlete. And that archetype of athlete is the quote unquote late bloomer. Something that I deal with a lot, and I imagine this is something you experience as well, is the kid that is doing everything correctly, but either their game is not flashy enough, their game has not developed enough, or the places that they're targeting, they have potential to ultimately get attention from, but where they are right now, they're not getting that attention. And those are the kids that I have, like, I would say the softest spot for, because I know that if they stick with it, they will ultimately be successful. Conversely, those are the hardest kids to convince to stick with it.
Yep.
And I would love to know what your experience has been like with those late bloomers, and I'll give you a follow-up after we talk about that a little bit. So have you had exposure to that kind of kid, and what's it been like?
Yeah, there's a lot of those kids. And, when I coached at the NAI level, I got a lot of JUCO kids who, JUCO is such a great option for late bloomers because you need a couple more years and you have to have the right coach at your JUCO who's going to pour into you and develop you and all of that. So yeah, lots of those in my time as a college coach and lots of those right now as a recruiter. And I think a lot of those athletes will have these goals and dreams of the big school in whatever situation. And so much of that it's a fine balance between pushing them to be the best they can and also the realistic where you are now, because there are other athletes where you are now, but they're here. And those are the athletes that are being recruited by those bigger schools. So if you are starting at a lower starting point and there are other athletes who are playing better than you, or they're taller, or they jump higher, or they've just been at it longer, whatever it is, you have to have intangibles. You have to have other characteristics better than they do. Your work ethic has to be twice what theirs is. Within the realm of reason and within the realm of expenses and energy and time and all that. But if you are a late bloomer, you have to wear that chip on your shoulder and really challenge yourself to see what you're capable of. They have to make a choice if they want the grit, if they want the hard work, or if they're comfortable with where they're at, and that's good enough.
All right, you just handed me a dynamite segue, Coach. So you have an athlete that's a late bloomer. You've given them that choice, and they look back at you and they say, all right, Coach, I'm going to stick with it. What's your advice to that kid?
Get in the weight room. Honestly, like so many, when I think about the athletes I'm working with now and I have worked with, honestly, so much of it is just like athleticism and strength and vertical. Because God gave you what he gave you. You're as tall as you are. We can't change that, but you can jump higher. You can get faster, genuinely doing the right things in the weight room and nutrition. Like those two things. You don't have to be perfect. Enjoy your life. Be a kid, all that. But if you are fueling your body the right way before and after workouts and you are putting all that effort in, you're going to grow leaps and bounds. And the younger the athlete is, the further they can go if they are working with that work ethic for those periods of time. So it's keep your eye on the prize. It's called a grind for a reason, right? It's not easy, or everybody would do it. But if they are willing to work, those are the biggest things for me.
I love that. This is I don't want to share too much, but a hilarious thing that you do not know. I just had a conversation with someone who I think has the potential to be a Division I athlete that will be a late bloomer. And the very first thing I said to her was, you got to do strength and conditioning. So that is insane and amazing. And there you go, more evidence that volleyball and basketball are, very similar.
Yep, absolutely.
So I grew up a big Billy Joel fan, and Billy Joel famously says in his song Sleeping with the Television On, I really wish I was less of a thinking man and more a fool who's not afraid of rejection.
Oh,
And
Jared,
I now
you
think
gotta
of that
sing
line.
it.
Okay, I'll give it a whirl. I really wish I was less of a thinking man and more a fool who's not afraid of rejection all night long. All night. Okay, I'm going to stop now. But thank you. Thank you for indulging me. I think of that song every time I say to a kid, have you reached out to any college coaches? And they reply back, no. Mm-hmm. And I've told myself this story that I think it's a fear-based thing. That, like, these kids don't want to be ignored by college coaches. They don't want to hear no. So they kind of do the ostrich defense. If I put my head in the sand and I do nothing, I think I won't get hurt. Is that a fair hypothesis? Would you think that is the big thing that drives kids not wanting to reach out to college coaches?
It is either fear of rejection or it's laziness. I don't see a third option. It's not knowing your self-worth or just not wanting to do the work and expecting it to be done for you. And I think there's athletes in both camps, and I think that there's athletes who have been told coaches will contact you or you're good enough that you'll get discovered, and yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But if you take that stance, you're going to get a handful of schools who are interested in you as opposed to being proactive and reaching out and creating success for yourself. Then you're in the driver's seat and you get to control, who gets a hold of your film.
I certainly don't want to give away all of your trade secrets for free, but
Give them all away.
Okay. That's your bit. Hey, you know what? I was given similar business advice, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But I do want to know, because I'm curious as to how similar we sound, especially in different sports. Mm-hmm. For the kid that's really reluctant to do that really believes that this is going to come to them or has that fear of rejection, what is your pitch to them? What is your, I need you to do this because?
Well, first of all, those athletes are usually not working with me because the athletes who are coming to me who need help want to do the work. I've had maybe a couple of athletes my whole time doing this that it was like, come on, I'm trying to help you, but I can't do it all for you, Right. So for the kid who says, I'm good enough, I'm, whatever, if they're past that June 15th date, I ask them, okay, who have you heard from? If we haven't heard from coaches and it's past that contact date, it doesn't look like your strategy is working right now. Would you like a strategy that works? So that's number one. Number two is, what does your network look like? Because that's another, there's so many myths in the recruiting process. Another one is that your coach will, I know that's a big thing for basketball, a little bit bigger than volleyball. My cousin actually played collegiate basketball and he's a trainer. I should connect you guys. But awesome. Yeah, he kind of has filled me in a little bit that there's kind of almost an expectation of your AAU coach to kind of, have those conversations sometimes and get
it's
you
a weirdly
recruited.
Political thing. If high-level AAU coaches essentially have to prove to their clientele that they can be a liaison. I don't actually like that as much because then what ends up happening, I hate to drive a tangent here, but what ends up happening is then that AAU coach exclusively sends kids D1 so that they can build that clientele list, whether that kid's a D1 kid or not.
Right, not looking out for their best interest.
Okay, sorry, I digress. Continue.
No, that's absolutely it. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know. We got to try something different. You got to be in the driver's seat of your recruiting process. If you're wanting it to just happen magically for you, maybe it will, but you're taking a chance. And it's also so much of what I do now as a business owner, I learned as a 16-year-old going through the recruiting process, and you're losing life skills. That's my conversation with the parent. The athlete doesn't necessarily think or care that they're losing life skills, but the parents do. The parents understand where the value is being lost there. So I just think it is so important that they are being proactive, that they understand where their best fit is, that they're reaching out to coaches as much as they can.
I appreciate you sharing that so much. It's so good that somebody's hearing it from somebody that's not me.
Right.
So thank you for sharing it. On a similar note, in terms of just tackling misinformation in the recruiting process, and this is from a newbie to a vet in this space. One of the things I was not prepared to have to answer in the moment, just because I never thought of it, was explaining to a recruit and their family what being recruited actually looks like. And not only have you done this longer than me and been in coaching spaces yourself, but also you were a recruited scholarship level athlete. So when someone asks you something as silly as, hey, coach, how do I know if a school is actually interested in me? Like, how do I know if a school is recruiting me? What would you say to that?
I like to say that the recruiting process, when you are a parent or a high school athlete, feels like you didn't get the passcode to get into the secret club. You know, like you didn't get handed that password, when really it's just an open restaurant and you can just go in and take a seat. There's nuance to the process. There's strategies to the process, but it's really a simple process when you break it down. If a coach is interested, they're going to tell you. Now, there's nuance if you're not past that contact date and you can't have conversations with coaches. Then you have to lean a little bit more on that AAU coach or somebody like us who can have more of those conversations for you on your behalf and kind of, give you your better idea. But if you are past that contact date, if a coach is really interested, they will tell you. They will make it explicitly clear. Now, caveat, coaches are notoriously terrible communicators.
It's hilarious how bad they are. It's a job based on coaching, and we're all bad at it. We all have to communicate. We're all bad.
We're all bad. It's a thing. They're inundated with emails. They get so many. So, yes, it's tough. So that's another reason why it is so important to keep being proactive and keep reaching out. I've had so many athletes over the years say, how do I get a coach to give me a phone call? I say, you ask them for a phone call. What? I can do that? Yes, you can do that. You can ask for the next step in the process. So it's not a complicated thing. If you're wondering if they're interested, they might not be. But if they are just a bad communicator, there's a little bit of grace there. It definitely gets to the point, if we've had a phone call, if we've potentially been on a visit, if we've done a couple of steps and they're not responding at that point, it could be disinterest. It could also just be that they're not that great of an organization. And then you have to decide, as the athlete or the parent, is this person valuing me? Are they showing me that they're valuing me by not responding to my texts and not responding to my emails? It doesn't necessarily mean the coach has moved on, but I think there's a little bit of a, cost benefit ratio there that we have to, kind of dissect.
This is another thing that almost brings us back to our fit at different levels conversation earlier, because a lot of times what I've seen at least is maybe a high D3 kid or a kid that ends up at a high D3 that has coaches all over them that want them on campus, are having great conversations, but is behind the scenes saying, Coach, hold on one second. I want to try to go D2. But then we find out that there's no D2s talking to the kid, and the kid has to take the initiative every time just to get them to respond. And what I try to explain is, there's a fine line between a coach being, polite and courteous to you, but you've really never gotten beyond the yellow light on the traffic light. You're not in the green zone. You're a yellow light for them. And these people really want you. And to your point earlier about being around the right people that are going to grow you, well, step one is the people that are going to grow you the most want you in the room with them. Mm-hmm. Is that something that transfers to volleyball as well, where you're having those type of conversations about, hey, follow the heat here. These people clearly want you.
1,000,000%. Okay. Chase where you're valued. If a coach is telling you, we want you, you're going to be the kid here, all those things, you are going to be happier on that team. External factors kind of excluded, because there's a lot of things that go into that. But in my experience, you are going to be so much happier on that team than on the team with the coach who you have to initiate every conversation and you have to remind them that you're there, and they're not giving you their time, and you're not getting to know them at a personal level. That's another thing. Like, coaches are personal people. Like, we're just personal people. We want to get to know you. So if a coach is not sharing who they are, if it's just kind of all at the surface, that could be another kind of yellow light kind of situation where I feel like most of the coaches that I know want to get to know the kid. They want to get to know their families. They want to ask some of the deeper questions beyond just what are you looking for, you know?
So I will tell you this about myself, because what you said resonated with me so much. My office was filled with what most people would consider to be junk. I had action figures from the movie Die Hard. I had the animal from the Muppets. I had a poster of Muhammad Ali. I had posters of my favorite bands. I had that Emotion is Contagious sign. I had my Spartan race medals. I had that picture with my wife, which, you know, seems important if you're married. I really like that picture.
That's a good one.
And I didn't have anything basketball related in my office, and I had a guitar. And whenever somebody came into my office, whether they were a recruit or an athlete, they knew. But there was no spoken thing. They just knew. I do not have to talk to this person about basketball to be in this space.
Right.
And it was a mission critical goal for me, even at the Division I level, for them to know, hey, there's way more to this guy than the game of basketball. And I'm sharing this with you because what you just said is so important, that even at the Division I level, when you are that's your identity. We'll say it that way. That's your identity. You are a student athlete. You're not in other clubs. Your club is the sport you're playing. But even at that level, these people have lives, and there's more to them than the game. So isn't it important, Coach, to find the people that are going to fit you the best?
One of the most important things you can do in your life.
Do you feel a weird way to make this conversation full circle? Would that be the reason why you say you have no regrets about PC? Because you found those people for you.
I found those people. I found myself. Ironically, it's like you just have no idea when you think you know everything, and you think you're king of the world. You're senior in high school, and it's like there's so much life that's about to hit you, and you're going to be in control of your schedule and your timeline. And I fiercely messed a lot of things up. While I was in college, I was irresponsible. I didn't make the best choices. I didn't make great grades. That first semester, it was a tough transition, and there were a lot of growing pains in that. But because of that, I'm where I am today, and I'm who I am today. And I couldn't trade that for, the entire world.
I'm so grateful that you shared that, not only because it was so powerful to hear, but also because wink, wink, nudge, nudge, young people, this is why we're doing what we're doing.
This is why.
We want you to find the place where you're going to turn into the best you. Where when you are, no hair on the top of your head, and you have children, and the most athletic thing you could do is cure your own sciatica every morning. We want you to be able to look back at your college experience and be like, boy, did I nail that choice. And I messed up a lot of stuff, but I got that right. That's what we're here to help you do. Is that a fair way to summarize it? I don't want to assign sciatica to you, by the way.
I did have that. I went to the trampoline park the other day with my kids, and I still cannot walk great.
I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing to judge you. I promise.
No, you're laughing with me. This is a safe place to laugh. And that's just kind of my personality. I'm not here to watch my kids jump on a trampoline. I'm on the trampoline with them. We're gonna go down the crazy slide and the zip line and all that. And yeah, it is so much. You think that once you commit to a school, you've made it, when really that is the first step into this life-altering experience that is college, for better, for worse. People have had terrible experiences at college, and things affected them negatively, or they overcame that. There's so much that goes on in college, and where you choose to go and the people you surround yourself with are going to affect how you transition into adulthood, which is waiting for you on the other side of college. Or maybe you're like me and you put off becoming an adult and you go to grad school and you're like, I'll figure it out a little bit more then, but it is very much, you're going to figure things out, and it's just so worth putting the time and energy into doing it well and doing it the right way.
All right, I got one more question for you before we let you go, and this is in the second half of this season, I'm asking this question to everyone because I think each of them will answer it a little bit differently and add value. But let's say we travel back in time, kind of. It's like a Netflix retrofuturistic movie, okay? You're okay. Allison Brown again. You're a high school sophomore, but it's the year 2024, okay? So the only thing we know about sophomore in 2024, Allison Brown, is that she wants to play college volleyball. Knowing everything you know now, how do you jumpstart your recruiting process as a 16-year-old?
Woo! Okay, let's do it. The number one thing for me would be to go and see more schools before I started. So I began seeing schools when I started my recruiting process, and I very much thought I wanted, to play at the highest level and go to the biggest school and everything. And my first visit to a school was to Colorado State. And I went there for a volleyball visit, and I met the coach, I met the team. They were all super nice, but I walked around this campus and I was like, this is huge.
It's massive. Right.
Huge. And I felt like if I walked away right now, nobody would have known I was there, except for the coach and the players, obviously. But I think if I had just gone around, I grew up in the North Texas area. I should have gone and walked around UNT, University of North Texas. I should have walked around SMU. I should have walked around Texas Wesleyan, which is an NAIA down there. I should have walked around Austin College, a D3 that was, very close. If I had just started with that, I would have had a much better framework for what I was open to, what I wanted, what kind of campus vibe felt right for me, as opposed to figuring that out while I'm having the conversations with college coaches, which puts a little bit more pressure and a little bit, it almost feels like you have less time to figure it out. So that's number one, is I would just go and experiment with like colleges that are in my area, and it doesn't even have to be a volleyball visit. It could just be an academic visit or just walking around the campus. I think that is, so immensely important early on in the process to just kind of figure out what you want. The second thing that I would do is I would have worked a lot harder on understanding my strengths and weaknesses as a player, because I wasn't incredibly self-aware, as many teenagers are not. I knew my strengths well. I did not understand my weaknesses well. So I do think, looking back, I thought I was giving it my all. I thought I was working as hard as possible. But really looking back, I left a lot in the tank. There were certain areas of my game where coaches told me, oh, you're a middle, you don't need that skill. So they didn't coach me on that skill. I didn't learn that skill. I didn't try. If I had tried, I could have been a different athlete. There's a lot of different pieces like that. I wish I would have understood my strengths and weaknesses more and really, worked hard to get better at my weaknesses instead of just saying, I won't do that since I'm not good at that, if that makes sense.
100%. 100%. And I think it's funny because you just tackled full circle again, awareness.
Here we are.
Yep. The biggest thing I think you can do is get aware early. And I think you just mentioned two really critical areas. Am I aware of the type of school that would resonate most with me? And I'm aware of my strengths and limitations, with an emphasis on limitations. What might a college coach be looking at that isn't so good?
Exactly.
All right. So Coach, how do we find you? Aside from the links that are going to be in the podcast description, how do we find you, Coach?
Yeah, you can find me. Most of my stuff is on Instagram at How to Get Recruited. I'm on TikTok at How to Get Recruited. Twitter, How to Get Recruited was too long. So I'm HTG Recruited on Twitter, or X. I'll
We can
never call it X. It's Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And then I actually have my own podcast, the How to Get Recruited podcast, that I would love to have you on, Jared. And then I can put you in the hot seat and flip this around. I know we could probably talk about recruiting for 6 hours and not get tired. So
as long as you can pledge to me that I will not have to sing for any longer than I did on this podcast, I think we're in the clear.
You will have to sing every answer. The whole podcast.
I can try my hardest. I can
Karaoke
maybe try
recruiting.
to answer in rhyme, because that's what I've been doing with the baby. Is like everything I say
Perfect.
rhymes. Okay.
Parenting changes you, man, for the better, all the way around.
Absolutely. Oh, it is done. Well, this has been a blast. So much great info. And again, just thank you for all the support, and thank you for just dropping this incredible knowledge. Have a great
Thanks
one,
so
Coach.
much for having me, Jared. Thank you.
That's going to do it for another episode of the Nail the Recruiting Process podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you got something out of today's podcast. If you'd like to learn more about anything related to Nail the Recruiting Process, the book, my work, maybe wanting to work with me one-on-one, anything under the sun, you're going to visit www.nailtherecruitingprocess.com. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can follow me at Nail the Recruiting Process on Instagram, or at Jared the Coach on Twitter and TikTok. Both of those handles are just one word, no characters, no spaces. If you'd like to ask something of me directly, if you'd like a question that maybe you want answered on a future podcast, or if you have an idea for something we should talk about in a future episode, please reach out to me via email. I would love to hear from you. My email address is recruitinggear@gmail.com. That's the word recruiting, then the word gear combined. recruitinggear@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to catch you next time.